Right now, the way society is set up, man is over nature, where, in my opinion, man should be equal to nature. We should respect nature as much as we do other men, but we don't. We're kind of working our way towards that, and I think that the Outdoors Club does its best to promote nature is our equal, especially through our Leave No Trace policy. We like to keep things the way they are, and do our best to keep other people doing the same, because we want the woods to be there for our kids and their kids, and at the rate we're going, they might not be. My nickname is Young Pisgah. It's self-proclaimed. There's a tunnel on the Blue Ridge Parkway called the Young Pisgah Tunnel, and you know, there are all sorts of rappers like Young Jeezy and so on and so forth, and so I took it on as Young Pisgah, being that I have a huge background in the Pisgah National Forest. I kind of grew up there. I went to camp pretty close by, and we'd go there on all of our trips. And then I went to the Asheville School, and our mountaineering program spent a lot of time there as well. Mountain biking, climbing, hiking, camping, fly fishing. That was fun. A lot of campers do expect to have fires on our trips. However, some places we go to, we actually aren't allowed to, or the places prefer that we don't build a fire. Sometimes we'll break that rule for, maybe if people are too cold, then we just have to do it. But if a place dictates no fires, like Shining Rock Wilderness, then we won't build a fire, and we're sure to tell campers. We use topographical maps in the Outdoors Club in order to tell us exactly where we are when we're in the wilderness. Topographical maps are easy to use as long as you know that each line represents 40 feet and you have a compass in order to align your map and tell you where you are. So this past weekend, we did a trip to the Linville Gorge Wilderness just east of Asheville, North Carolina. It's a place that we hadn't been to yet as the Outdoors Club, and I think that we had quite the adventure in the wilderness. So the goal of the trip was to get from one side of the gorge to the other. So we shuttled cars, so we had one here and one here, and we were just trying to get to the other car. And so we hiked down into the gorge, and it was beautiful. It was the perfect temperature for a backpacking trip. It was about 50 degrees, and we were shedding layers constantly because we were moving so quickly. We were going downhill into this beautiful space. We were sometimes even climbing on our hands because the trail did go up and down, but it was mostly downhill. There was tons of rock faces everywhere. We could see Table Rock Mountain pretty much the entire time we were there. Table Rock is a really beautiful mountain. It's cool. It's your typical mountain like that, but then there's this big table of rock that comes out the top of it. It's crazy. And so we could see that most of the time while we were hiking. And we ended up along this river called the Linville River, thus the Linville Gorge. And we followed the river for a few miles, and then we had to cross it. So typically there would be a bridge there, and the bridge was out for some reason. Probably the river flooded at some point and carried the bridge away. And so thus we had to ford the river. Fording a river is crossing a river without a bridge. So that can be anywhere from walking through the river to jumping stones and trying to keep yourself dry. And we have to do it often because most of the time there aren't bridges because we're in wilderness areas. This actually took some time as we had to find a safe place to cross that wouldn't get us too wet. And it took about an hour. We found a place where we could get across, but it did involve quite a jump. So this spot was about 3 stones, pretty flat stone there, and then a pretty fast rapid, and that you would have to jump across. It was probably a 3-foot gap, and then you also had to jump up onto another rock there. And so we had 2 campers get across easily. They were Josh and Austin, and they just hopped across like goats happily. Josh was first, and he went with his pack on. It was crazy. And we all tossed our packs across to him, and then Austin went over and helped him out. And then we ran into some problems getting other people over. Clay got a little bit wet, but he was fine. And then Willie went. Willie was my co-leader on the trip, and he didn't quite make it. He was really confident he would, but he didn't. He got soaked, and he made it on his second try, kind of, and then ended up having to change. I didn't make it myself. I ended up about waist deep because I grabbed Willie's hand and I grabbed Austin's hand, and they were pulling me up. But Willie is much stronger than Austin, and I might be a little bit stronger than Austin when I'm at that point of gravity pulling on him. And so basically, Willie pulled me, I pulled Austin, and Austin got flung through the air and landed, thankfully, on the rock on the other side, which was crazy. It happened very quickly. He landed on his hip and didn't end up wet at all, which was great. And he wasn't hurt, which was also a miracle. Then we made our way to our campsite. So the original plan, once we were on the other side of the river, was to take a trail up to the campsite. But because of a rock outcropping that was in front of us now, we couldn't get to our campsite. So we had to do what's called a bush push. So we found a way up onto the mountain that was in between us and the trail, and thus our campsite. And we climbed it. It was a waterfall looking thing. It was really cool, like Jurassic Park, climbing up this thing. And then we got up that, and we just had to climb up and over a mountain through uncut brush, rhododendron everywhere. A lot of people were yelling and struggling through it, but everyone pushed through without complaining. We made it to the top of the mountain, and from there it was pretty much smooth sailing. Then we made it to our trail. We actually ended up a bit ahead of schedule. We were about a mile up that trail based on our bush push, and we found a campsite in about 15 minutes, set up camp, made dinner, and the sun set right as we were starting to cook. We went to bed pretty early and woke up with the sun. We made ourselves some breakfast, and then we headed out the trail. We did what's called a meditation hike. So we took our time from each other, so you would wait until the person in front of you is out of sight, and then you start. And so it gives you a feeling like you're alone in the woods. It's good for your clearing your thoughts and being one with nature, really. And we did that until we got back to the car, and then we went to Linville Falls, which is where we camped on our first night when it snowed, which was crazy. And we saw the falls, which were absolutely gorgeous, pun intended. The falls were great. It's a 45-foot drop through these crazy rocks. It was awesome. And you also had a really good view of the entire gorge, so it was cool. On our last day, we were able to see exactly what we did. And we had a great group of people, and everyone had fun.